In today's tale, Krazath, a Vorian hunter, sets out to prove himself by hunting the most dangerous member of humanity, a retired Special Forces soldier named Marcus Chen. What begins as a hunt transforms into something neither could have foreseen. Follow along as the chase becomes a battle for survival, and both Krazath and Marcus discover the true meaning of strength. Is the galaxy ready for the rise of humanity as more than just prey? Watch as these two hunters, once enemies, forge an unlikely alliance. The game has changed, and the universe will never be the same. What do you think? Can a hunter truly become the hunted? Leave your thoughts below and join the conversation. This story is just the beginning. The Grand Hall of Hunters loomed before Krazath, its ancient stone walls standing as silent witnesses to countless trials and triumphs. Bathed in the eerie glow of 3 moons, their scarred surfaces were a testament to time itself, reflecting the long history of the Vorian race. Each moon cast a strange, crimson hue upon the hall, the dim light seeping through the tall crystal windows and spreading across the polished stone floor in pools of deep red. It was a quiet, solemn place where only the whispers of time seemed to echo, the weight of tradition heavy in the air. The soft hum of distant machinery vibrated beneath the floor, but it was the stillness of the chamber that dominated the atmosphere. Krazath stood tall at the center of the hall, his scales shimmering in the strange light like polished obsidian, reflecting the ominous glow of the moons above. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Today was the day that would shape his future, the day he would prove himself as a true hunter. His heart beat with a rhythm of excitement, anticipation, and a twinge of doubt, feelings he had never experienced before. The trials of the Vorian people were legendary, and this was his time to step forward, to show that he could live up to the traditions of his ancestors. The sound of his claws clicking against the stone floor filled the silence of the grand hall, each echo reverberating in the vast space. It was a rhythm that signified the beginning of something monumental. His first hunt. A young Vorian hunter's rite of passage. The rules were simple, yet brutal: hunt and kill a worthy prey from another world. Success would bring him the honor of his people, and failure meant either disgrace or death. Krazath moved with purpose, walking towards the massive terminal that sat in the center of the hall. It was a relic, both ancient and advanced, built to catalog the galaxy's most dangerous species. The smooth surface of the terminal gleamed in the dim light, its holographic displays flickering with images of creatures from across the stars, beasts with deadly claws, sharp fangs, and intimidating strength. Krazath's eyes scanned them all, his sharp mind calculating, evaluating. Each one was formidable in its own right, but none seemed worthy of him. None were worthy of his first hunt. The terminal's database hummed, its soft vibrations filling the air. Krazath's claws hovered over the interface as he navigated through the species catalog. Creatures of immense strength, swift predators with razor-sharp claws, and cunning beings capable of outsmarting their prey. Yet, none of them piqued his interest. He wanted more. He sought a challenge, something legendary to prove his worth. As his search continued, his gaze landed on a file buried deep within the system, hidden from the surface. It was labeled Humans, Earth. The words themselves were simple, almost mundane, but the file was surrounded by a haze of red warning symbols, like a veil of danger and mystery. Krazath's claws hovered over the file, a low growl escaping his throat. His curiosity was piqued. He tapped the screen, and a warning immediately flashed: restricted access. Special permission required. Krazath's brow furrowed in confusion. How could such a weak species deserve such a warning? He whispered to himself, his voice laced with both disbelief and intrigue. The screen flickered as the file opened, revealing limited data. Humans were weak, fragile creatures with no natural weapons, their senses dull and their skin soft, their bones brittle. Their instincts were primitive, their survival dependent on technology and ingenuity. To Krazath, they seemed like the perfect prey, easy to track and kill. Yet, the file's final note caught his attention, a small detail buried at the bottom: approach with extreme caution. Full containment protocols required. The words sent a shiver down Krazath's spine. This didn't make sense. Humans, fragile, helpless, yet their file was shrouded in secrecy. His mind raced as the mystery gnawed at him, an unsettling feeling creeping into his thoughts. What made them so dangerous? He tapped the screen again, seeking more information, but the database refused to yield further details. There was a story hidden here, a truth that was being deliberately kept from him. The uncertainty gnawed at his resolve, and for the first time, Krazath felt something strange: doubt. His sharp mind struggled to understand. These humans, these fragile, unimpressive creatures, had earned a level of fear and caution he could not fathom. A growl escaped his throat, the sound low and menacing. "I will hunt them," he muttered, his voice filled with determination. "I will prove their weakness, or uncover the truth behind these warnings." His claws clicked against the terminal's surface, and the screen faded to black. Krazath stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of his decision. He had chosen his prey, though something inside him told him that this hunt would not be like any other. He turned and walked out of the grand hall, the echoes of his footsteps mingling with the whispers of time, as the shadows of the three moons watched over him. The hunt was about to begin, and Krazath was ready. But deep within, a strange anticipation twisted in his gut, and the mystery of the humans lingered, a puzzle that no Vorian hunter had yet solved. For 3 days, Krazath immersed himself fully in the artificial training dome, a massive structure built to push his physical and mental limits. The space was vast, nearly endless, designed to simulate the harshest environments from across the galaxy. The air hummed with artificial gravity, creating a weightless sensation that made each movement feel both unnatural and enhanced. The floor beneath his claws was smooth, a grayish metallic sheen that reflected the faint glow of simulated sunlight. The dome's landscape shifted with every command, jagged mountains rose in the distance, thick forests with alien plants appeared, and towering rock structures grew from the ground like giant sentinels. Each scene was designed to test his endurance, strength, and agility. Krazath's body moved like lightning, his muscles honed from years of training, each strike of his claws cutting through the air with deadly precision. His movements were a deadly ballet, his limbs flowing seamlessly from one action to the next. He was a machine of death in perfect harmony with the environment. His camouflage suit shimmered in the light, a masterwork of technology that bent the photons around him. It was designed to make him vanish into the surroundings, a ghost in the endless expanse of the dome. As he moved, his form blended effortlessly with the environment, his outline disappearing, leaving behind nothing but a faint distortion in the air. Krazath tested its limits, standing still until the environment around him shifted, causing the suit to adapt to its new surroundings, making him as invisible as a shadow. Each motion he made was deliberate, calculated, designed to conserve energy for when it was truly needed. His claws scraped across the simulated terrain with practiced ease, cutting through targets designed to mimic the flesh of his future prey. His speed was unmatched, his agility flawless. Yet, something gnawed at him, a whisper that echoed in the back of his mind. Despite the hours he spent in the dome, pushing his body to its absolute limits, Krazath could not shake the unsettling feeling that the humans, his chosen prey, were not what they seemed. The file he had read about them was brief, almost dismissive. Humans were described as weak, fragile creatures with no physical advantages. Their senses were dull, their skin soft, their bones brittle. They were a species defined by their reliance on tools and technology, the data suggested. But that small, cryptic note had remained in his thoughts, haunting him. Approach with extreme caution. Full containment protocols required. The words were like an echo he could not escape, their meaning unclear, yet laden with foreboding. What made them so dangerous that they required such elaborate warnings? What was hidden in the shadows of their history that he had not yet uncovered? Krazath paused in the middle of his training, sweat trickling down the side of his face, his breath coming in deep, steady gasps. His claws, sharp and gleaming, trembled for the first time. He had never questioned his instincts before, but something about this hunt, something about the humans, was different. "They are prey, nothing more," he muttered to himself, his voice strained, as though forcing himself to believe the words. Yet, even as he spoke, a small voice inside him told him otherwise. A voice that urged caution, that whispered of unknown dangers lurking beneath the surface of their weakness. Krazath shook his head, dismissing the doubts. He was a Vorian hunter, a warrior trained from birth to track, to kill, to conquer. His people had built their empire on strength, and Krazath had the power to match that legacy. He could not allow uncertainty to cloud his judgment. Still, the nagging feeling remained, like a small stone in his boot, uncomfortable and persistent. With a growl of frustration, Krazath turned his attention to the tools before him. He needed to prepare. He would not let the mystery of the humans deter him. He gathered the weapons that would serve him on his hunt. His first tool was his stealth suit, its sleek black design nearly weightless, fitting him like a second skin. It had been crafted to mold seamlessly with its wearer, bending light around him, making him invisible to the naked eye. When Krazath wore it, he could vanish, becoming one with his environment. Next, he collected the toxin injectors, each a small but lethal weapon filled with paralyzing poison. These injectors were his preferred method of disabling his prey before striking the final blow. The toxins were quick and efficient, capable of immobilizing even the strongest creatures within moments. He loaded them into the pockets of his suit, ensuring they were within easy reach. Finally, Krazath grabbed his energy weapon, a sleek, compact tool designed to unleash devastating power when necessary. It was an elegant weapon, with a glowing power core at its heart. Though Krazath preferred to use his claws in the hunt, believing that a true hunter did not rely on technology for a kill, he knew that the unpredictability of the humans required him to be prepared for anything. This would not be an easy kill, Krazath thought, his claws tightening around the hilt of his weapon. The humans may have appeared weak, but they had already proven themselves to be cunning, and Krazath could not afford to underestimate them. He would bring his full strength to bear, no matter the cost. He stood there for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon of the training dome. His breath steadied, the adrenaline that had been building inside him beginning to settle. He was ready. He would hunt the humans, and he would bring back his prize. With a final glance at the weapons around him, Krazath turned and made his way toward his ship. The hunt was about to begin. The unknown was waiting for him, and he was ready to face it head-on. He would prove his worth, one way or another. 3 days had passed since Krazath's ship had landed on the foreign soil of Threshold 7. The dense alien forest enveloped him, the air thick with moisture that clung to his scales like a second skin. The very atmosphere felt alive, a pulsing, breathing entity, as if the planet itself was watching him. The air smelled faintly of unfamiliar, sweet herbs and pungent earth, mingling with the sharp scent of wet foliage. Above him, the canopy of twisted trees, thick with vines and strange blossoms, stretched endlessly, their leaves rustling as the wind whispered through them. The faint, melodic chirping of unseen creatures echoed in the distance, adding to the eerie symphony of life that surrounded him. Krazath's eyes narrowed, his sharp pupils adjusting to the dim light filtering through the trees. His senses were alert, scanning the terrain with precision. Yet, despite the constant hum of life around him, his focus was singular. His prey Marcus Chen was nearby, in a small cabin just ahead. The Vorian hunter's claws clicked softly against the ground as he moved through the dense underbrush. He was a shadow, a silent predator, blending effortlessly with the surroundings thanks to his camouflage suit. The fabric shimmered in the muted light, bending the photons around him until he seemed to vanish into the foliage. Each step was calculated, a perfect example of his training. The underbrush absorbed his every movement, no twig snapped, no leaf rustled. He was undetectable. The cabin loomed ahead, small and unremarkable, hidden within the dense forest. Its wooden walls were weathered and scarred by years of exposure to the harsh environment, the metal roof streaked with rust. A faint light flickered from one of the windows, casting a soft glow that barely penetrated the darkness surrounding it. Krazath crouched low, his heart beating in quiet anticipation, his senses straining to detect any sign of movement inside. Inside, Marcus was unaware of Krazath's presence, at least, that's what Krazath believed. The human moved with an eerie calm, pouring himself a cup of tea. His movements were precise, practiced, and yet Krazath could sense that something was off. The way Marcus's eyes never left the window, how his body remained tense despite his casual actions, he was aware. A faint feeling of unease crept up Krazath's spine. This wasn't the prey he had expected. Marcus's gaze shifted slightly, as if scanning the tree-line. There was a stillness to him, a quiet vigilance that Krazath had not anticipated. He was no mere civilian. For a moment, Krazath paused, his instincts churning with the realization that this human, though seemingly unarmed, was far from the weak creature the database had described. "Something's out there," Marcus muttered under his breath, his voice low, barely above a whisper, yet sharp enough to cut through the silence. His hand, steady and unhurried, reached beneath the shelf, pressing a hidden compartment with practiced ease. Krazath's heart skipped a beat. He knew. He's aware, Krazath thought, a flicker of confusion crossing his mind. From his concealed position, Krazath watched as Marcus moved to a corner of the cabin, his every action deliberate and calm. He pressed another button, and suddenly the air around the cabin seemed to shift. Krazath's sensors flared to life, detecting subtle shifts in the temperature, the faintest of disturbances. Sensors? Marcus was preparing, setting up countermeasures, perhaps even detecting Krazath's presence. His mind raced as he watched the human, whose every action spoke of a soldier's discipline. For 20 years, Marcus had been trained to fight, to survive against enemies far more dangerous than himself. He had faced countless opponents, but Krazath had never imagined the hunt would involve such a formidable adversary. The sound of metal clicking, a drawer opening, and the subtle movements of Marcus shifting equipment didn't escape Krazath's attention. The human was not afraid. He had already prepared himself for what Krazath had assumed would be a one-sided hunt. There was no panic in Marcus's movements, only a focused determination. The Vorian hunter clenched his claws tighter, a growl rising in his throat. He had underestimated his prey, and now it was clear that this hunt would not be as simple as he had believed. Krazath adjusted his position, carefully shifting his weight to remain undetected, but his mind was no longer solely focused on the prey. He studied Marcus closely, observing his every action. The human was methodical, precise. It was as though he had done this before, as though the world itself had taught him how to survive against things that lurked in the dark. The longer Krazath watched, the more unsettled he became. This human, this prey, had already turned the tables. What was it about Marcus that allowed him to prepare for an unseen predator with such calm? It was as if Marcus wasn't just reacting to an enemy, he was anticipating a hunter, someone who had walked this path before. And yet, Krazath had never faced a prey so aware. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, a tense standoff in the shadowed forest. Krazath's instincts, honed by years of training, screamed at him to strike, to move, but he held back. The human had shown him nothing but preparation and vigilance, qualities of a predator, not prey. Krazath clenched his fists, his claws digging into the soft earth beneath him. The hunt had just become something entirely different. It was no longer about stalking a weak creature, it was about understanding a worthy adversary. And as much as Krazath hated it, he realized something: he was no longer sure who the hunter truly was. Marcus moved again, his gaze scanning the surroundings as he took slow, measured steps toward the door, his hand subtly shifting beneath his jacket. Krazath's breath caught in his throat. The human was about to leave the cabin. Was Marcus seeking him out? Or was he simply drawing him closer into the web he had already spun? This hunt was no longer about killing a prey, it was a test of survival, of instincts, and of strategy. Krazath couldn't help but feel the shifting tide in the air, the realization dawning on him that the real hunt was just beginning. The first rays of the morning filtered through the thick canopy, casting slivers of pale light across the damp forest floor. The air was still, heavy with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Everything was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind through the trees, as Krazath crouched low, his eyes locked on the figure moving silently through the dense foliage ahead. Marcus was on his way to the stream exactly as Krazath had predicted. His sensors had picked up the faintest fluctuation in temperature, the subtle disturbance in the air as the human approached. Krazath's heart beat steadily in his chest, his body poised and ready for the strike. The time had come. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to leap forward and claim victory. The human Marcus was unarmed, unaware of the deadly force lurking in the shadows. This would be an easy kill, Krazath thought, watching the human silhouette grow clearer as he drew closer to the stream. The simplicity of the hunt thrilled him. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, as Krazath pressed his body deeper into the underbrush. His camouflage suit shimmered, blending with the surroundings. He was a shadow in the forest, a blur of movement among the trees, his presence undetectable to the naked eye. His claws twitched with anticipation, ready to strike. Marcus reached the edge of the stream, kneeling down with a calmness that struck Krazath as odd. The human bent low to fill a metal container with water, his attention fixed on the flow of the stream. The sound of water lapping against the rocks was a dull hum in the background. Krazath took a slow, steady breath, preparing to pounce. In an instant, he surged forward, his claws extended, his body still cloaked in the shimmering invisibility of his suit. He moved like a ghost, faster than the eye could follow, closing the distance between them in a blink. His target, his prey, was within reach. Krazath's teeth bared, his muscles coiling to strike with devastating speed. But then, something unexpected happened. At the exact moment Krazath lunged, Marcus's body twisted with unnatural grace. In a flash, he dropped to the ground, rolling away from Krazath's strike, avoiding the Vorian's deadly claws by mere inches. The air around Krazath hummed as his claws sliced through empty space, the force of his missed attack sending a shock of frustration through his body. Marcus hit the ground with a soft thud, his movements fluid and instinctual. Before Krazath could even react, the human was already on his feet, pulling a combat knife from a hidden sheath beneath his jacket. The blade gleamed in the faint light as Marcus held it in a ready position, his gaze unwavering, focused solely on Krazath's cloaked form. "Nice tech you've got there. But camouflage has its limits," Marcus said, his voice calm, as though the encounter was no more than an inconvenience. The words pierced through Krazath like a blade of ice. For the first time in his life, he was confused. The human had not panicked. He had not run, nor had he frozen in fear, as Krazath had expected. Instead, Marcus stood his ground, his posture confident, his body poised to strike back. How? Krazath's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. This was no prey, no helpless creature to be hunted. This human, Marcus, was not acting like the prey the Vorian hunters had always faced. He was calm, prepared, and unafraid. Krazath's pulse quickened as the realization began to sink in, this human was different. Marcus's eyes were locked onto Krazath's position, his body tense like a spring ready to release. Every inch of the human radiated readiness. Krazath's mind reeled. His claws, which had been poised to strike, now hovered uncertainly in the air. The human was waiting for him, daring him to make a move. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. The tension was almost tangible, a palpable weight hanging in the still air of the forest. Krazath, still concealed in his camouflage, considered his next move. His instincts told him to strike again, to break through Marcus's defenses with force. But a growing unease gripped him. What if the human knew something he did not? Marcus shifted slightly, his eyes never leaving Krazath's position, the combat knife held loosely in his hand. There was no fear in his eyes, only focus. He was prepared, just as Krazath had been taught to be. The realization hit Krazath with the force of a hammer, this human was no mere prey. He was a hunter in his own right. A low growl rumbled deep in Krazath's chest, frustration boiling over as the hunt took a sharp turn in an unexpected direction. The rules had been clear: hunt, kill, succeed. Yet here he was, facing a human who seemed more than capable of defending himself, perhaps even capable of hunting Krazath. The thrill of the chase, the simplicity of the hunt, had evaporated in an instant. What was supposed to be an easy kill had transformed into a battle of wits and survival. Marcus took a small step forward, his eyes narrowing as he began to close the gap between them. He was no longer merely a prey animal to be hunted. He was, in every sense, a predator. Krazath's mind raced as he reassessed his position. The ground beneath him seemed less solid now, as if the very earth was shifting underfoot. He had never been forced to reconsider his approach mid-hunt. He had always been the predator, the one in control. But now, the tables had turned. The human was no longer the prey, he was an equal. The hunt was no longer about killing. It was about understanding. And Krazath had just realized that the greatest challenge of this hunt would not be overcoming his prey's weaknesses, but uncovering the true strength that lay hidden beneath the surface. Days blurred into each other, and the hunt had devolved into a stalemate. Krazath, once full of confident anticipation, now found himself doubting his every move. The traps he had set, cunningly designed to capture and immobilize, were expertly evaded by Marcus. Each attempt Krazath made to strike was thwarted, as if the human was always one step ahead, aware of the dangers lurking in the shadows. Krazath's patience began to wear thin, his senses stretched to their limits. The relentless pursuit had exhausted him. His energy was waning, and the stinging pain from the injuries he had sustained during the failed attacks gnawed at him. Wounded and drained, Krazath found himself retreating into the sanctuary of a small cave. The walls, jagged and rough, seemed to close in on him, amplifying the silence around him. The faint echoes of his breathing were the only sound that filled the stillness. He sat on the cool, damp ground, his blood mixing with the dirt as he tended to his wounds. His claws trembled slightly as he applied the makeshift bandages, a sign of his growing frustration. The hunt had turned against him, and now, he was at a loss. The human, Marcus, was unlike any prey he had ever encountered. It was then, in the quiet of the cave, that he heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps on the ground outside. Krazath's body tensed, his muscles coiling in readiness for another confrontation. But when the figure stepped into view, it was not what he had expected. Marcus stood there, unarmed, his stance relaxed yet calculated. The same calm expression he had worn during their previous encounters was present now, but this time, it was accompanied by something else, a faint smile. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice steady, almost casual. Krazath's claws flexed instinctively, the growl building in his throat. He was still wary, still on edge from their ongoing battle, but something about Marcus's demeanor kept him from attacking. It wasn't the bravado of an enemy. There was no fear, no aggression in his eyes, only something unexpected, an invitation. Krazath said nothing, but his eyes narrowed as he studied the human. Marcus, with no weapons visible and no apparent malice, walked into the cave without hesitation. The atmosphere between them was thick with tension, yet it felt different from the tension of a predator stalking its prey. This was something else, something Krazath hadn't anticipated. Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. "Humans aren't prey. We never were. We're persistence hunters. We don't stop until the job is done." The words hit Krazath like a blow to the chest. He could feel the truth in them, the undeniable weight of experience in Marcus's tone. The galaxy had painted humans as weak, fragile creatures, nothing more than easy prey for the strongest predators. Yet Marcus, this human, stood before him with an air of authority and confidence, not as prey, but as an equal. Krazath's mind raced as the realization began to settle in. The hunt had not gone as he had expected. Humans were not prey, they were predators in their own right, in a way that Krazath had never imagined. Their strength lay not in their physical power, but in their persistence, their adaptability, and their unyielding drive. Marcus was not a fragile, helpless creature. He was a force of nature, one that fought and survived not by strength alone, but by outlasting and outthinking his enemies. Krazath's claws relaxed, the tension in his body slowly ebbing away as he listened to Marcus. It was clear now, this was not a hunt. This was something else entirely. Marcus's eyes softened as he spoke again, his voice tinged with understanding. "We're not so different, you and I. We both hunt. We both survive. But it's not about killing the weakest, Krazath. It's about understanding our enemies, finding the common ground." The words hung in the air, their meaning sinking into Krazath's consciousness. The hunt that had started as a test of strength, as a way to prove his worth, had become something far more complicated. It was no longer about defeating an opponent, it was about learning from him, understanding what made him so different, yet so similar. It was in that moment that Krazath realized something crucial. He had been so focused on proving his superiority that he had failed to recognize the true strength of his prey. Marcus had taught him that the greatest predators were those who understood their surroundings, their enemies, and themselves. And so, the hunt came to an unexpected end. Krazath and Marcus, once enemies, now found common ground. It was not through battle or brute force, but through mutual respect and understanding. Together, they faced a greater threat, a new danger that neither could face alone. The Tavari raiders had attacked Marcus's colony, threatening the lives of countless innocent humans. These raiders, fierce and ruthless, were an even greater challenge than Krazath had anticipated. Marcus turned to Krazath, a glint of determination in his eyes. "We have a bigger fight ahead of us. They're out there, and we can't let them win.
Krazath nodded, his mind now clear.
The realization had come too late for the hunt, but it had arrived just in time for something far more important. The true challenge was not to kill, but to protect. They were no longer adversaries, Krazath had a new ally. Together, they would face the Tavari threat, united by a common goal. Under the cold, distant stars, Krazath and Marcus stood side by side, their differences now irrelevant. They were both predators in their own right, but it was their alliance that would carry them through the coming battle. What had begun as a hunt had evolved into something much greater. The hunt for survival had turned into a fight for something more, a shared future, one built on understanding and strength. The stars above them, cold and distant, bore witness to a new alliance, one forged through the fires of battle and the clarity of shared purpose. Together, Krazath and Marcus would face the Tavari, not as hunter and prey, but as equals. And the hunt, no longer just a test of strength, had become a fight for the survival of both their worlds. And so, the hunt ends, but the journey is far from over. What started as a test of strength between two predators has now evolved into an alliance that could change the fate of the galaxy. Marcus and Krazath, once enemies, have found common ground in a fight that neither could have faced alone. The stakes are higher than ever, and the true battle for survival has only just begun. What do you think about the unexpected twist in this hunt? Will the alliance between these two powerful beings be enough to defeat the Tavari? Drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more epic tales of love, war, and the mysteries of the unknown. The universe is full of surprises, and this story is far from finished.